Number 8. Ghost fishing. Ghost fishing is when abandoned nets and traps snatch up arbitrary animals, even if nobody's operating them. It's a careless practice that proves that we don't have to be actively trying to screw with the seas to really cause some major havoc. Nets and traps are either lost or abandoned on purpose, and they don't just sink to the bottom and become part of the coral. Instead, drifting nets regularly ensnare fish or even smaller sharks and other marine life in their deadly folds. These creatures mostly die of exhaustion trying to escape, or in some cases, suffocate under the waves. Since nets are more sophisticated than ever and designed not to rip or break, even larger creatures have a hell of a time getting themselves untangled from the unforgiving nets. The sheer amount of gear lost or abandoned at sea is staggering, making up 10% of all marine debris, and it's also on the move. Shifting currents and storms sweep nets, fishing pots, and traps all over the world, affecting many different populations of fish. This movement also stirs up debris from the sea floor, making certain areas of the ocean far less hospitable than they were before. Unfortunately, the solution simply isn't easy. Since a lot of this equipment is lost rather than deliberately discarded, it's very difficult to crack down on and may just be an accidental way that humans sow problems in our planet's waters. Number 7. Bycatch. Bycatch might have a fairly harmless sounding name, but this practice is one of the most detrimental activities that fishers regularly practice in our oceans. It's essentially careless fishing, where other marine creatures are swept up in nets designed to catch specific types of fish. Depending on where the nets or traps are located, almost any animal in the sea or near it can get swept up in the melee. Birds, turtles, and endangered species are not safe from bycatch and are routinely netted and thrown away. Not only is bycatch extremely inefficient, but it's also highly dangerous, especially to vulnerable creatures snatched up from their environment and then tossed back into the sea. Sometimes, even if the fish is in demand, the boat will toss it back due to space issues or more lucrative fish in the area. Millions of animals are dumped back into the waves, either dead, stunned, or wounded, and since bycatch encompasses 40% of all catches, it's a major problem for both the marine population and the planet. The biggest culprits of bycatch? Industrial fishing operations. Smaller boats rarely have this issue at all. So, if you want to be kinder to the seas, support your local little fisher. Number 6. Unregulated fishing. Unregulated, illegal, and unreported fishing all have serious consequences for our seas, especially in waters that are already overfished. Since unregulated fishing doesn't have to conform to any specific environmental standards or codes, it's really just like the Wild West out there. Fishers don't have to adhere to quotas, so they can fish as much as they want, even catching endangered or vulnerable creatures. It's a significant issue from a sustainability perspective, and can even turn entire ecosystems on their heads. Unfortunately for marine creatures, unreported, illegal, and unregulated fishing rakes in some really big bucks and can be lucrative for fishers trying to catch a break. The industry is estimated at between $10 to $23 billion per year, and the only real way to crack down on it seriously is to target the money itself. Fisheries who buy in-demand fish like Chilean sea bass need to take a serious look at where their products are coming from. Only then can we stem the tide of unregulated fishing and keep our waters safer for the creatures that call them home. Number 5. Bottom trawling. Bottom trawling, a method of fishing where huge nets scrape their way across the ocean floor, is one of the most damaging fishing practices of all time. Nothing can escape the gargantuan nets, which are weighed down by tons of ballast to keep them from drifting upwards. As you can imagine, bottom trawling nets catch not just the animals that fishers want to catch, but utterly steamrolls the seabed, crushing coral and creatures in its unrelenting wake. Steamrolling giant nets across the ocean floor poses a considerable threat to endangered species, many of whom are caught up in the snare. Another disastrous downside of bottom trawling: it disturbs underwater sediment. stirring up a stew of debris that can be hazardous or even toxic to marine life. It's no exaggeration to claim that bottom trawling destroys entire ecosystems, as well as coral formations where smaller, vulnerable animals can hide, leaving them exposed to predators. Although we don't think much about the creatures in the deepest, darkest depths of the sea, there are plenty of them down there, and they're all susceptible to the havoc wreaked by bottom trawling. It's a nasty practice that both conservationists and scientists are struggling to crack down on. Number 4. Poisoning. Poisoning, or cyanide fishing, is all too common in areas in Southeast Asia, and it's killing vast populations of marine life. If you're wondering, why would anyone want to poison a fish that they're planning on eating, you're certainly not alone. Many people shudder at the fact that their freshly prepared, delicious plate of fish might be contaminated with cyanide. Still, this method has been around for years because the sodium cyanide used doesn't actually kill the fish, it just stuns them. Unfortunately, it also devastates any coral reefs that get clogged up with the poison as well. Every single year, 65 tons of cyanide is purposely dumped straight into the seas, filling coastal waters with a toxic slurry of chemicals. The drugged fish are nabbed and sold to aquariums, and some even end up in restaurants in Hong Kong and Singapore. Fortunately for the fishes, cyanide is falling out of fashion. These days, it's more humane and eco-friendly to simply use plant-based stunners instead. Number 3. Muroami. Muroami is a Southeast Asian practice that literally shreds coral reefs to smithereens in its mission to find fish. Muroami consists of a vast net and some stones or concrete blocks suspended by cranes right over the surface of the reef. When it's fishing time, fishers slam the blocks straight into the reefs to frighten the fish, who inevitably flee the coral and go straight into the waiting net. In many cases, the fish doesn't really have a choice, as their homes crumble to bits right around their fins. The coral itself is totally decimated in the process. Hundreds of years of coral growth can be totally destroyed in a matter of just a few short hours, drastically changing the dynamic of the sea for many years to come, if the coral ever comes back at all. To make matters worse, muroami is often carried out by children illegally and can be wildly unregulated, so it's tough to protect either the coral reef or the kiddos from the dangerous impact of muroami. Number 2. Blast fishing. Blast fishing has been around for centuries and is one of the most destructive fishing practices ever to spew its wrath in the 7 seas. As the name suggests, blast fishing relies on explosives to kill all of the fish in a single area, then sweep them up into a net or trap for human consumption. Shockingly, more and more people are turning to blast fishing as a viable way to catch their dinner, probably because it's so incredibly cheap to buy explosives. Some fishers nab unused explosives from the mining industry legally, but the vast majority are purchased on the thriving black market. Blast fishing is a highly detrimental activity, affecting huge patches of the sea floor and disturbing entire ecosystems. It can damage delicate coral reefs and, most certainly, slaughters fish populations that are far outside its target market. Number 1. Shark finning. Shark finning is one of the most ghastly fishing practices on the planet, and probably the reason why the great white sharks have taken such vigorous vengeance against their human tormentors. Shark finning involves catching a live shark, cutting its fins off, and hurling the poor animal straight back into the sea, where it will likely bleed out or suffocate. It is basically the equivalent of cutting off the arms and legs of a person and kicking them out on the street. This cruel practice has one objective: to collect the fins for shark fin soup, a delicacy in China and Hong Kong. If you want to slurp up the remains of tortured sharks, be prepared to spend some big bucks. Shark fin soup regularly goes for $100 or more a bowl. Since demand for this curious food is so high, it's estimated that tens of millions of unlucky sharks are stripped of their fins every single year, including some endangered varieties. On an economic note, slashing off shark fins for soup is very inefficient, as these icky trophies take up a lot of space on boats. It's far better and much kinder to save the freezer space for other types of fish. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be swimming and get trapped in a ghost fishing net, or consume a plate of fish that was caught with cyanide fishing? Let us know in the comments section below.